Imagine waking up one day and realizing that years have passed, but nothing in your life has truly changed. The dreams you once had remain distant. The goals you set for yourself have faded into the background, and the life you envisioned seems more like a fantasy than a real possibility. You feel stuck, as if you're merely going through the motions, waiting for something to change, but nothing ever does. This feeling of waiting for the right moment, waiting for permission, waiting for certainty, has become the silent epidemic of our time. We've become experts at postponing life, convincing ourselves that someday, when the conditions are just right, we'll finally start living the life we've always imagined. But what if the secret to a fulfilled life isn't about waiting for the perfect moment, but rather seizing the imperfect present? What if the difference between a life of regret and a life of meaning comes down to a simple yet profound shift in how we approach each day? Today we're going to explore the remarkable journey of Viktor Frankl, a man who didn't just theorize about living with purpose. He embodied it under the most extreme circumstances imaginable. A man who, when faced with the darkest chapter of human history, discovered that even when everything is taken from you, you still retain the ultimate freedom, the freedom to choose your response to any situation. Frankl's story isn't just inspiring, it's transformative. It challenges the very foundation of how most of us approach life, success, and fulfillment. And by the end of this exploration, you'll discover the powerful insight that allowed him to find meaning in suffering and purpose in the present, an insight that could change everything about how you live from this moment forward. Viktor Frankl wasn't born extraordinary. He entered the world on March 26, 1905, in Vienna, Austria, to a middle-class Jewish family. From an early age, Frankl showed an intense interest in psychology. By the age of 16, he was already exchanging letters with Sigmund Freud. He later studied medicine at the University of Vienna, specializing in neurology and psychiatry, and began developing his own psychological approach. Before the war, Frankl had established himself as a promising psychiatrist. He had developed a new form of psychotherapy called logotherapy, which focused on helping people find meaning in their lives. He had a successful medical practice, was happily married, and had a promising academic career ahead of him. By conventional standards, he was on the path to success, building a respectable career, working toward financial security, and establishing his professional reputation. But in 1938, everything changed. Nazi Germany annexed Austria, and the Holocaust began to unfold. Frankl, as a Jewish psychiatrist, suddenly found himself in grave danger. He had opportunities to escape. In 1941, he obtained a visa to emigrate to America. This was his ticket to safety, to continuing his promising career, to pursuing his ideas in freedom. All he had to do was leave. But there was a problem. Leaving meant abandoning his elderly parents to the Nazi regime. The conventional wisdom would have told him to save himself, to escape while he could, to preserve his own life and work. After all, what could one man do against the machinery of the Third Reich? In this moment, Frankl faced a choice that would define the rest of his life. He could wait for a better solution, one that would allow him to escape with his family. He could play it safe, prioritizing his own survival and future. Or he could make the harder choice, the one that aligned with his deepest values, even at tremendous personal risk. Frankl let his visa expire. He chose to stay with his parents, knowing that this decision would likely lead to his imprisonment. This wasn't a blind decision based on emotion. It was a conscious choice made with full awareness of the probable consequences. He chose meaning over safety, purpose over self-preservation. In 1942, Frankl, his wife, his parents, and his brother were arrested and transported to the Theresienstadt concentration camp. For the next 3 years, Frankl would endure 4 different concentration camps, including Auschwitz, where most prisoners were sent to the gas chambers upon arrival. What makes Frankl's story so remarkable isn't just that he survived, it's how he survived. In the midst of unimaginable suffering, stripped of everything, his possessions, his family, his identity, his dignity, Frankl made a discovery that would change not only his life, but the lives of millions who would later read his work. He discovered that even in the most extreme circumstances, where all external freedoms are removed, one essential freedom remains: the freedom to choose one's attitude towards suffering, as he would later write in his seminal work, Man's Search for Meaning. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. This insight didn't come easily. In the camps, Frankl battled the same despair, the same hopelessness, the same temptation to give up that claimed so many lives. He watched as fellow prisoners surrendered to apathy, as their will to live eroded in the face of constant dehumanization. The resistance Frankl faced wasn't just external: the brutal conditions of the camps, the constant threat of death, the systematic dehumanization. The greatest battle was internal, fighting against despair, against meaninglessness, against the natural tendency to become bitter and resentful. He later described how prisoners who lost a sense of future also lost their grip on life. Those who couldn't envision any purpose or meaning beyond their present suffering often died quickly, even when physically they seemed capable of surviving longer. Their spirits gave out before their bodies. Frankl observed that prisoners who maintained hope, not naive optimism, but a genuine sense of purpose, were more likely to survive. He noticed that having something to live for, whether reuniting with loved ones or completing important work, provided the psychological resilience needed to endure extreme suffering. For himself, Frankl created purpose by mentally reconstructing the manuscript of his book on logotherapy, which had been destroyed when he entered Auschwitz. He would write notes on tiny scraps of paper he managed to find. He imagined himself giving lectures on the psychology of the concentration camp after liberation. He pictured being reunited with his beloved wife, not knowing she had already perished in another camp. These weren't mere fantasies or escapism. They were conscious acts of meaning-making, of choosing to find purpose, even in the most purposeless environment imaginable. Frankl wasn't waiting for liberation to resume living. He was living purposefully, even in captivity. This is where most people get it wrong about Frankl. They assume his great insight came after the camps, when he had time to reflect and write. But the true power of his story is that he developed and lived these principles in real time, under conditions designed specifically to strip humans of all meaning and dignity. When Frankl was liberated in April 1945, he had lost everything. His wife, his parents, and all but one of his siblings had perished. His professional work had been destroyed. His health was severely compromised. Yet within 9 days of his liberation, he was already dictating his observations and insights, which would become Man's Search for Meaning, a book that has since sold more than 16 million copies worldwide. But wait, before we dive deeper into what made Frankl's approach so powerful, let's ask ourselves a question. What allowed him to respond to unimaginable suffering with such resilience and purpose, when so many others understandably succumbed to despair? The answer isn't about extraordinary willpower or some innate capacity for suffering. It's about something far more fundamental, something that challenges how most of us think about happiness, success, and fulfillment. Frankl's genius was recognizing that meaning isn't something we find by pursuing happiness directly. It emerges when we dedicate ourselves to something beyond ourselves. As he famously wrote, "Don't aim at success. The more you aim at it and make it a target, the more you are going to miss it. For success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It must ensue, and it only does so as the unintended side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself." This perspective stands in stark contrast to our culture's obsession with the pursuit of happiness. We're constantly told that if we just get the right job, find the right relationship, achieve the right goal, or buy the right things, we'll finally be happy. But Frankl's insight suggests that this approach has it backward. Rather than asking, "What do I want from life?" or "How can I be happy?" Зрение Франкл предложил, что мы должны спросить, что просит жизнь от меня и какое задание ждет от меня для выполнения. This shift from self-focus to purpose focus is revolutionary because it transforms how we experience challenges, setbacks, and suffering. When we see difficulties as meaningless obstacles to our happiness, they become unbearable. When we see them as part of a larger purpose or as opportunities to express our deepest values, they become manageable, even meaningful. This isn't positive thinking or naive optimism. It's a radical acceptance of reality coupled with an equally radical insistence on finding meaning within that reality, whatever it might be. Frankl didn't deny the horror of the concentration camps. He acknowledged it fully, but he refused to let that horror define the meaning of his experience. Frankl's approach is built on three core pillars. First, the freedom to choose one's attitude in any circumstance. This doesn't mean pretending everything is fine when it isn't. It means recognizing that between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies our power to choose how we respond. Second, the will to meaning. Frankl believed that the primary motivational force in humans isn't pleasure, as Freud suggested, or power, as Adler proposed, but meaning. We need to feel that our lives matter, that what we do has significance beyond our immediate satisfaction. Third, meaning can be found in three ways: through what we create or accomplish, through what we experience or whom we love, and through our attitude toward unavoidable suffering. This means that meaning is always available to us, regardless of our circumstances. Frankl's daily practices reflected these principles. After his liberation, he didn't wait to rebuild his life. He immediately resumed his work as a psychiatrist, helping others find meaning in their suffering. He remarried and founded the Viennese Neurological Polyclinic. He lectured extensively around the world, wrote 39 books, and taught at several universities well into his 80s. But what made his approach truly remarkable wasn't what he accomplished, it was how he approached each day. Frankl didn't defer living until some future milestone. He engaged fully with each present moment, finding purpose in both the extraordinary and the mundane aspects of life. He practiced what he called medical ministry, treating each patient not just as a collection of symptoms, but as a whole person searching for meaning. He maintained that the doctor's role wasn't just to alleviate suffering, but to help patients find meaning in their suffering when it couldn't be avoided. In his personal life, Frankl savored simple experiences, mountain climbing well into his senior years, teaching, spending time with his family. He didn't compartmentalize his life into now and someday. He lived his philosophy in real time, demonstrating that meaning isn't something we find eventually. It's something we create continuously. Now, as we approach the core insight of Frankl's journey, let's pause and consider how his approach challenges conventional wisdom. Most self-help advice focuses on setting goals, acquiring skills, or changing external circumstances. But Frankl's experience suggests that the most profound change happens not when we alter our circumstances, but when we transform our relationship to those circumstances. This brings us to the central revelation of Frankl's life and work. Life is not primarily a quest for pleasure or a quest for power, but a quest for meaning. The greatest task for any person is to find meaning in their life, and this meaning can be found in every moment, whether we're suffering or celebrating, succeeding or failing, living or dying. This isn't just philosophical musing. It's a radical reorientation that changes everything. When we stop waiting for the perfect conditions to start living meaningfully, we discover that meaning has been available all along. When we stop postponing happiness until some future achievement, we find that meaningful engagement with the present creates its own form of fulfillment. Frankl didn't just theorize about this approach, he lived it until his death at age 92 in 1997. His life was testimony to the power of finding meaning in each moment, rather than waiting for the right moment to start living. The impact of Frankl's approach extends far beyond his personal story. Research in positive psychology has consistently validated his core insights. Studies show that people who report a strong sense of meaning in their lives experience greater well-being, resilience, and even better physical health than those who report high levels of pleasure but low meaning. In one longitudinal study, researchers found that having a purpose in life was associated with a lower risk of Alzheimer's disease and mild cognitive impairment. Another study found that a strong sense of purpose was linked to a reduced risk of heart attack and stroke. People with a clear sense of purpose even show different immune system responses to stress. The field of post-traumatic growth, which examines how people sometimes experience positive psychological changes following traumatic events, builds directly on Frankl's observations about finding meaning in suffering. Researchers have found that many people report becoming more compassionate, more appreciative of life, and more clear about their priorities after processing difficult experiences. Neuroscience is beginning to explain the mechanisms behind these findings. When we engage in purposeful activity, our brains release neurochemicals that enhance focus, reduce anxiety, and create a sense of well-being. This suggests that meaning-making isn't just psychologically beneficial, it's biologically adaptive. But perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from the countless individuals who have applied Frankl's principles to transform their own lives. From prisoners finding purpose while incarcerated, to cancer patients discovering meaning amid their treatment, from veterans healing from war trauma to ordinary people navigating everyday challenges, Frankl's approach has proven remarkably versatile and effective. So how can we apply these insights to our own lives? How do we stop waiting and start living with meaning and purpose? Here's a practical framework drawn from Frankl's work and the research it has inspired. First, shift from passive questioning to active responsibility. Instead of asking, "What do I want from life?" or "Why is this happening to me?" Component placement ask, "What is life asking of me right now? And how can I respond to this situation in a way that aligns with my deepest values?" Second, identify your unique contribution. Frankl believed that each person has a specific vocation or mission. This doesn't necessarily mean your job. It means the particular way you can contribute value to the world that no one else can in exactly the same way. Reflect on your unique combination of talents, experiences, and values. Where do they intersect with the needs around you? Third, practice attentional freedom. While we can't always control our circumstances, we can direct our attention. Rather than focusing on what's missing or what's wrong, deliberately direct your attention to possibilities for meaning in your current situation. This isn't denial. It's selective focus on what you can influence, rather than what you cannot. Fourth, engage in values-based action. Identify your core values, what matters most to you, and take small, consistent actions that express those values, regardless of how you feel in the moment. Over time, these actions create a sense of integrity and purpose that transcends mood and circumstance. Fifth, practice tragic optimism. Frankl coined this term to describe the ability to maintain hope and find meaning despite life's inevitable tragedies. It involves acknowledging pain and difficulty while refusing to let them have the final word. Ask yourself, what can I still do despite this challenge? Rather than, why bother trying when things are so difficult? Sixth, cultivate meaningful relationships. Frankl emphasized that love is one of the primary sources of meaning. Invest in relationships where you can both give and receive love. Practice deep listening, express gratitude, and be willing to be vulnerable. Meaningful connection requires presence. You can't build it while waiting for a better future. 7th, embrace necessary suffering while avoiding unnecessary suffering. Frankl distinguished between avoidable and unavoidable suffering. When facing unavoidable suffering, ask what meaning might be found in it. When suffering is avoidable, take action to alleviate it rather than romanticizing pain. 8th, live in dialogue with life. Treat each day as a conversation between what life asks of you and how you respond. Be curious about what each situation might be teaching you, or what contribution it might be calling forth from you. This dialogue-based approach keeps you engaged with the present rather than postponing life until some idealized future. The beauty of this framework is that it can be applied regardless of your current circumstances. Whether you're facing a major life challenge or simply feeling stuck in the mundane routines of everyday life, these principles provide a pathway to greater meaning and engagement. And here's the most important part. You don't need to wait for a perfect understanding or perfect conditions to begin. Meaning emerges through action, not before it. As you take steps aligned with your values and responsive to the needs around you, clarity often follows. The sense of purpose isn't something you figure out intellectually and then implement. It's something you discover by living intentionally in the present. This brings us to a crucial question. What will you do with this insight? Will you file it away as interesting information, or will you allow it to transform how you approach this day, this moment? The pattern of postponement is deeply ingrained in our culture. We say, "I'll start living when," and fill in the blank with various conditions. When I get the promotion, when I find the right partner, when I have more time, when I feel more confident, when the pandemic is over, when the political situation improves, when I retire. But Frankl's life and work offer a powerful alternative. Start living now, with purpose and meaning, regardless of conditions. Find the freedom within your current constraints. Discover the meaning available in this moment, not someday. This isn't about denying challenges or pretending everything is perfect. It's about refusing to put your life on hold while waiting for perfect conditions. It's about recognizing that the quality of your life isn't determined primarily by your circumstances, but by how you engage with those circumstances. Viktor Frankl survived the unsurvivable not by waiting for liberation, but by finding meaning within captivity. After liberation, he didn't wait to heal completely before resuming his work. He channeled his suffering into service. Throughout his long life, he demonstrated that meaning isn't found by waiting. It's created by engaging fully with the present, whatever it contains. The invitation is clear. Stop waiting for life to begin and recognize that it's already happening. Your freedom lies not in controlling circumstances, but in choosing your response to them. Your purpose isn't something you'll discover eventually. It's something you can create now through how you choose to live each day. The time for waiting is over. Life isn't happening someday. It's happening now. And in this moment, you have the freedom to choose a response that aligns with your deepest values and creates meaning, not just for yourself, but for everyone your life touches. What will you choose?